So you need a new warehouse. Really? Are you sure about that? That's what we're going to be talking about this week, coming right up. So a lot of companies come to us here at Logistics Bureau with the challenge that they've run out of space. They need a new warehouse. That's the most common reason that people think they need to move to a new warehouse, because they want something larger. I can't honestly think, in the last 26 years of helping hundreds of companies with these issues, of somebody who moved to a smaller warehouse. Can't think of one. Must be out there. But generally, in 100% of cases in my experience, they're moving to a larger warehouse because their business is expanding, their SKU range is expanding, whatever it might be. And the first thing they want to do is get a bigger facility. Well, at least the logistics and supply chain people do. The CFO generally doesn't, because they don't want to pay more for a bigger warehouse. So my question in the video this week is, do you really need to move to a bigger warehouse? And we're making the assumption that you're moving because you need a bigger one. I would question that, and I have questioned that with a few of our clients over the years, and guess what? We've managed to keep them in the same warehouse, just using the space more efficiently, and they got a lot more life out of their existing facility. It's well worth considering, not just for the fact that if you're moving to a bigger facility, it's generally going to cost you more, unless you're moving from a high-cost area to a low-cost. There's the disruption and all the rest of it, but yeah, you don't want to be moving if you don't have to. So what are some of the things that we need to consider? So generally it's going to be a lack of space. Well, the first and obvious one, and you're going to go, yeah, well, sure, that's obvious, Rob, is you're carrying too much inventory. Over the last couple of years through COVID, we've all experienced that, increasing inventory levels. Things are settling down a bit now. People are getting a handle on inventory levels, but I still think there's a degree of nervousness around supply chain or supplier reliability and lead times and things like that. So generally people are carrying a little bit more. So that's going to require a little bit more space. But not just a question of the overall inventory level. What we find in a lot of businesses is they're carrying the wrong inventory. And so I'll put a link to, if I can find it, I'm sure there's a video on here from Melanie. Let's put a link up here, who's one of our inventory experts, who does a lot of work in inventory diagnostics and warehouse diagnostics. And working with Melanie over the last couple of years, what I found is that a huge number of companies that we work with are not necessarily carrying too much overall inventory, but it's not balanced correctly. And there's a lot of very, very slow moving stock. Sometimes they're not carrying enough of the stock in high demand, the A's, but they're carrying way too much of the B's, C's, and so on. And that's a very common thing. So if you are running out of space, I'd say one of the first things to do is have a look at your inventory. And I'm not just talking about weeks of cover and things like that, but go through your ABC really carefully, right down to SKU level, and look at that tail, and are you really having to carry as much of those slower moving items as you have? Perhaps that stock has built up over time. So inventory is the obvious one. Have a look at that. The next thing is to have a look at the layout. And I've seen this happen with a few of our clients over the years, where there were some very simple fixes. So for example, I'm thinking of one a couple of years ago, where I think they had about, well, it wasn't a large warehouse, 7, maybe 10,000 square meters. Running out of space, they were considering moving, and we went to have a look and thought, there could be an easy fix here. They had some really wide aisles. I forget precisely what they were, let's say 3.5 meter aisles or something like that. And they were using counterbalance forklift trucks and all the rest of it. And one of our specialists looked at alternative MHE and came up with the idea of using, articulated forklifts. So we're not talking about turret trucks where they can drive in very narrow aisle and the forks turn to the side and operate like that. The productivity of those is obviously a lot slower than reach trucks. I'm talking about a forklift that basically bends in the middle, like a bendy bus. They can operate in a much narrower aisle than 3.5 meters, and they're quite quick to operate. So they're quite productive in terms of pallets per hour and things like that. So we did a quick bit of analysis, and I couldn't believe it, but we managed to shoehorn in 30% more capacity into the warehouse just by using different MHE. So you say, well, how does that work? You have to stop operating for a couple of weeks. No, they actually did the whole change over the weekends. So a crew would come in at the weekend, they would close up 3 or 4 rows of racking, and make the aisles narrower, put all the stock back in, then operate for the next week. Next weekend they'd come in, next 3 or 4 rows, close them all down, and then obviously, finally they were left with a lot of space at the end where they could put in new rows of racking. What an easy way to increase the capacity of your warehouse without really impacting the productivity too much at all. So think about the layout. I mean, I've just talked about aisle width, but there could be other elements of the layout where if you use the full capacity of the warehouse, and don't just think in terms of footprint, don't think 2-dimensionally, but think in 3 dimensions. How can you better use the cube of the warehouse? Very often there are some things there that you can do to increase the life of a warehouse. Hey, look, I'm not saying it's going to work for yours, but an obvious thing is putting in mezzanines, putting in picking operations maybe, or storage of very slow-moving items up on mezzanines, things like that. There's all sorts of stuff that you can look at. In terms of the warehouse operation, also look at the way that you're picking products. And I talked about this in a video, in last week's video, I think, talking about the number of pick slots in a warehouse. Depending on whether you are picking from 1 layer, 2, multiple layers, have you got pick walls, have you got some sort of automated picking, precisely how you undertake that picking can have a big impact on the cube of the warehouse that is taken up by the picking activity. So even by changing around some of that, you can get a lot more capacity back. So there we go. Look, I just wanted to put that question in your mind. Because very often, people will walk around the warehouse and go, oh, look, we're out of space, we've got to move, and there's lots of stress and people don't want to pay more and so on and so forth. But sometimes there can be some really easy fixes that might get another 1, 2, 3 years life out of that particular facility. So just some thoughts to look at, maybe have a look at your inventory, see if you can reduce it somewhere. Have you got the wrong inventory? Have a look at the layouts, things like aisle widths, have a look at the picking technologies that you're using, the picking methods. Maybe you can think of some other ways that you could actually improve the utilization of that warehouse cube. Do comment down below. I'd love to see your thoughts on that as well. I'm sure you've got lots to share as well. So 4 simple ideas. When you run out of space, don't immediately think, we need a bigger warehouse. Think, how can we extend the life of this one? And then if you can't, start having a look, maybe at a new facility. And if you need help with any of that, of course, do call out to us. We're here to help. My contact details, as always, are in the description down below the video. But hope you enjoyed this video. Looking forward to seeing your comments, and see you next time. Bye for now.